Hello everyone, welcome to Decision Points with Andrew Denison. So for my first game review, I decided to bring you a game I'm fairly familiar with and think a lot of. That game is Three Kingdoms Redux. The designers are Christina Wei and Yo Liang. If I butchered that, I'm sorry. They're better known as Christina and Youster on BGG, and they're two of the friendliest people I've ever had the fortune to talk to. It's been published by their company, Starting Player, for a couple years now. It's been recently re-released by Capstone Games here in America, with a little bit of upgraded components, some linen finish on things, that kind of thing. Other than that, I own the Starting Player copy, and it's very, very functional, beautiful to look at. The Capstone just takes it that little notch higher. Now, as I said in my last video, the goal of what I'm doing here is to talk to you about the interactions and decisions that you're going to be making during Three Kingdoms Redux. If you want a rules teach, my recommendation is to go check out the live playthrough done by the fabulous people over at Heavy Cardboard. They do a wonderful rules teach with great cameras, and they've just got the setup to do that so much better. So why should I do it? Just go check out their video, play through Three Kingdoms Redux. What I want to get to, though, is the interactions you're going to be making in this game. What are those decisions, those crunchy things you have to figure out? Well, first of all, you want to know that Three Kingdoms Redux is fundamentally kind of an auction game, worker placement / auction. You're going to get some generals at the beginning, and you're one of three sides, either Shu, Wei, or Liu. Shu, Wei, or Wei, yeah. So anyway, you're one of these three kingdoms. What's going to happen then is you're going to start with your ruler, and you're immediately going to pick generals. So depending on which side you are, because they all start just a little bit different, is the number of generals and the number of resources you're going to have. Cao Cao tends to start with very few resources, but a load of generals. Liu Bei, on the other hand, starts with loads of resources and few generals. And then Sun Jian is somewhere kind of in the middle of that. Then you have to go about figuring how you're going to play your game. And one of the first decisions you're going to make is, what generals do you get? Like I said, this game's kind of an auction bidding worker placement. So you kind of have unique workers. Each general has stats for sort of civil capability, military capability, what kind of units he can lead, and also a special power. So every one of these has special powers. So once you get your hand of generals, you're immediately, okay, which synergizes well? What's my strategy going to be? And you pick your generals based on that. And then at 2 or 3 other points of the game, you're going to be able to add more generals to your pool. So you start off making some very critical decisions. The improvements you may be able to build to your kingdom, we play with a variant. Normally it just says you get this money, or many of them. We play with the variant of whatever it tells you to draw, you draw 2 more than that and keep and discard. So for example, if you were to draw 1 state improvement, you would draw 3, take 1 out of those, put the other 2 at the bottom of the deck. We found that gives people a little bit more choice in it, and I've never not used that variant, and frankly, I would just recommend doing it. But those are other decisions you're going to be making. Then you get into this auction, and you've got a board with all the different things you can do, both military and civil. You're going to, be able to increase your rice, increase your gold input. You're going to start working to build armies, build improvements, basically get the emperor on your side, garner some popular support. All of these things will help you either improve your armies, improve your capability to feed your armies, improve the stats and special abilities you might have in your kingdom, such and so forth. So that is very important. Now, the auction in this game represents the fact that during the Three Kingdoms period, it was very big in turmoil. There was a tripartite state. All of them really wanted to be emperor. And the deal was they were all playing off each other. Like, I will ally with you this time because if I don't, he wins. Well, now I got to ally with you, otherwise they win. And so that auction represents that political intrigue. So, for example, if I put my guy on collect horses so I can build a cavalry unit, another player may try to outbid me on that. And kind of what that represents is either, hey, there's only so many horses to go around, I'm offering a higher bid, or maybe it's, something like, oh, I see Sao Sao's building a big cavalry army. Why don't we just go steal those horses from him? So that's kind of what the auction represents, all of this little intrigue and everything that was going on the whole time. Those are critical in decisions because, like I said, Liu Bei has very few generals. He does not have a lot of auction potential. So you have to either fight really heavily over one spot, or you have to kind of go, okay, what are they going to be going for, and what can I go for that they aren't, so that I can guarantee to win all of my bids. So you have to make those kind of decisions. There can be an alliance thing, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So once you've done the auction and you've had that nice, delicious tension, in this game, I am always looking at the board. I'm always trying to get into my opponent's heads. What are they going for? Is that important to them? Is that important to them? Oh my God, don't take that from me. It's the most important thing in the world. That low-level tension to high-level tension persists through the entire game. There's never a point where you feel this is a shutout and overwhelming victory. You also are going to have battles. Battles are highly abstracted. They're basically another kind of auction. You'll put out a general, put out some units. Your opponent will try to counter that. And if you win that and you're the winner of this battle, then you have to just make a real critical decision here, because in order to generate military victory points, you have to station generals and armies. The key thing here is once you station that general, you no longer have that general for the auction anymore. That can be a big deal. However, he is now generating military points. On the downside, you now have to feed and pay that army, which means you better be producing the right amount of rice and gold in order to feed that army. If you don't, you basically take debt tokens. And if you're taking those kind of negative point debt tokens, you're out of the game. You're not going to be in it in the long run. So those battle choices are really critical. Who am I sending? Who am I not? That kind of deal. That's another crunchy decision. Okay. Now, the way this game is ultimately going to score is through these different categories. So you'll start out with your military points. You get points for going up on an emperor track, basically working to supplant the emperor and have yourself named emperor. You can get points for your economy. So if you have more upgraded rice and markets than anybody else, you'll get points that way. You can get civic harmony, which is basically, there's a little track that's just for you on your side. It's basically improving your tribal relations. That counts, as well as how much popular support tokens you have. You get points for having more people stationed in borders than other people. And the way these categories are awarded, it's kind of a first gets this, second gets this, third, thanks for playing, you get nothing. And so in a 3-player game, that means in that category, odds are one's going to be getting nothing. That just happens. And then there's rules for ties and things like that. This is probably the weirdest part of the game. There's not a real basic score track except for the military track, but there are all these different ways of getting points in the end. And I think it probably takes you at least one play of the game to where you really kind of understand what's going on with that. The last thing to talk about that's really unique and an interesting decision in this game is the alliance token. So if you play 3-player games specifically, or either games that can be 3-player, the biggest issue is with 2 people basically going head-to-head at each other, and then the other player walks away from the game. Well, the way they prevent this is through this really super clever alliance mechanism. So what's going to happen is who's ever in 3rd place, they get this alliance token. They can put it out on any of the common bidding spaces. What that allows to happen is that who's ever in 2nd and 3rd can both place on that specific space against player number 1. And if they win, both the 2nd and 3rd player get the benefit. So that's an interesting decision. you can discuss this. Okay, what do you think he's going after? Is he going to be trying to build up his military? Maybe we should block him there. Or maybe you stay quiet about it. You just throw it down where you want it and be like, hey, second player, this is a good spot for me. If you want in on it, you have to come where I am. I've seen people throw out the token somewhere and then never actually put anybody there. It was just a threat, just to scare the first player away from that area, not to invest in it. And so these are all very interesting, awesome decisions you have to make. But this turn order thing with the alliance token, that's going to change every round, because who's first, second, and third depends on how many auctions you win. So normally for the first 2 or 3 turns of the game, Cao Cao's going to be first with Sun Jian and Liu Bei working against him. However, usually after turn 3, this becomes very much more nebulous. Sometimes I'm in the lead, sometimes somebody else is in the lead, sometimes I'm the second player, sometimes I'm the third player, and it just kind of bounces around based on whoever is kind of doing the best job there. So you can use that as another really interesting decision. All of those things make for an extremely meaty, good game. It's hard for me to... This was my number 1 game for a long time. Arguably still is, because I haven't made a new list. Maybe something's going to bump it off, but this game's going to remain in my top 5. So some other cool things about the game. The artwork is beautiful. This is one of the best produced games I've ever seen, as well as the capstone version, just taking it up a little bit notch like Clay likes to do, adding in that linen finish and some of the other stuff. But it's a beautiful game. There is unique generals. Every worker is unique. I've looked through. There are no workers or generals that have the same ability and the same stats. There's no repeats. That's awesome. The art flavor is actually taking from artistic representations for that general. So when you see your card that has Cao Cao on it, it has an image from a massively important historical situation that general was in, and every card is like that. There are no duplicate cards anywhere in this game, and I find that awesome. The alliance system. I haven't played Churchill. I haven't played Triumph and Tragedy, which are other 3-player only games. Beating this one's going to be tough. This is a most excellent 3-player game. Couple downsides to the game, or at least issues with getting it to the table. It is a 3-player game. That's not 1, 2, and a bot. 3 only, period. You cannot play it with any other player count. That can be rather awkward to pull off at a game night sometimes. It also, for some people, might be on the slightly longer side. I would say my first play of this probably clocked in at about 3.5 hours. Anymore with an experienced player group, 2.5. It's not too bad, but it might be a little long for some people. It's also a little bit of a bear to teach, because you have to explain all the bidding spaces and all the decisions to keep in mind and whatnot. So it can be a little bit of a bear to teach for some people as well and to absorb. But if you invest in this game, it has a tremendous payoff. I've played it lots. I would play it again at the drop of a hat. Like I said, arguably one of my favorite games of all time. And this game is just loaded with crunchy, wonderful decisions and player interaction. This is not a multiplayer solitaire Euro. You have to see what other people are doing. You have to be in that fight. You're pushing them out, getting pushed back yourself. Those are the kind of games I'm looking for in today's Euros. Something where, I couldn't play this at home and get the same experience. This game, to shine, you need 3 people at the table. And it helps if there's similar play experience, but usually after a game or 2, you're going to get this under your belt and do just fine. So if you have not had a chance to play Three Kingdoms Redux, go out and play Three Kingdoms Redux. If that sounds appealing to you at all, the decisions I've talked about and the game itself, go out and buy a copy. This game has historically not been that easy to get a hold of. Clay, I know, still has plenty of copies left. The last time I talked to him about it, which was a couple weeks ago. They're there. Go buy them. Enjoy the game. So, thank you for joining me on Decision Points. And that, once again, was Three Kingdoms Redux. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Please come visit the Good, the Bored, and the Ugly on all the various forms of social media, or at least a lot of them. I've included the guild link in the notes. Our guild number is 2173. Come leave a question or answer some questions that we might use in a future show. You can email us at goodboredugly@gmail.com, Twitter at goodboredugly. My personal Twitter, which I do a lot of my board game discussion on, is at Denison Science. That is where I am most active. Also on Facebook at Good Bored Ugly, and our podcast can be found on iTunes and on Podbean.